Question from microphone number 2.
Chair, I'd like to introduce Craig Caulfield.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On REM, a former executive, Joseph Healy, has recommended the abolition of short-term variable REM, retaining long-term variable REM. I'm a supporter of this. I think if you polled everyone in the room here and said, do you all understand all the variables in REM, it would be just about impossible for anyone to understand it. And there's dozens of pages that go into the annual report. So the first point is understanding it. And the second point is that parts of the short-term variable REM can be gamed. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but they don't seem to hold up strongly. So I would like the board, I doubt that this is something you're going to do, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, is to eliminate short-term variable REM. I'm not saying reduce the overall pay. That might mean an increase in fixed REM, and it might mean an increase in long-term variable REM to do with reputation. Happy to do that. This is just a conversation about the breakup.
Yeah.
But is that something that the board can consider?
Well, can I just make a comment about short-term variable REM over recent years? And I can talk this authoritatively, having worked in the industry now for over 40 years. In my mid-career, there was very little long-term REM, and most of the variable REM was short-term. Progressively over the last few years, less and less pay is in short-term REM. So, and even what we call the short-term incentive, 40% of it is deferred over for a couple of years into equity. And we reduced that component, that short-term component, last year. We reduced it even further when we brought in the new LTEA instrument. So I think you'll find that if you go back, say, over about 10 or 15 years, there's been a significant reduction in the amount of remuneration that is in that short-term incentive. So while it hasn't been completely eliminated, it is significantly smaller than it would have been 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh yes, I agree with that, and thank you for that explanation. That brings to mind for me, I think it's the regulators that are behind it rather than the boards. Let me know if you think otherwise, but the regulators have been advocating for changes here.
Well, the regulators have been advocating for more deferred compensation, and they've also been advocating for the use of non-financial indicators in that. And that's, of course, reflected in the new REM scheme that we introduced last year, which met the new regulatory standard, CPS 511. So, thank you.
So is there any consideration, Chair, that you can consider at a board meeting eliminating STVR? If the trend is going that way, it might be something that occurs in the future that can be brought forward to make it simpler for all the shareholders, even for the people earning the money, to understand exactly where it's coming from.
Well, we'll note your comment. We have no current plan on that regard, I have to say. Frankly, we're trying to let the current REM scheme bed down because we had so many changes between 2018 and 2023. We'd just like to have a year or two without changing the scheme. So.
Fair enough. I have another question. Is that fine now?
Please.
Net promoter score, I notice, is -2. So net promoter score can change from -100 to +100, and -2, you're third among the 4 banks. So it's actually dropped back since last year, I understand. It's a very low rating. Now I look at your institutional bank on the same page, you've got a score of 44.
Yes.
Like a pretty good score across the board there. Excellent on the institutional side.
And I would add that our Bank of New Zealand has a very strong positive score as well.
What's the Bank of New Zealand score, please?
Oh.
Around that 44, I believe.
About that 40 number.
Yeah. Okay, well that's fabulous.
It is, when I referred to having a very good position there, it is a very, very good position. The other business we have with a very high NPS is our UBank, our online digital bank.
Okay, thank you. Well, the largest part of NAB's business is dealing with customers in Australia, not the institutions, etc. And so -2 is disappointing. Both on a comparative basis to your peers,
yes,
but certainly on an absolute basis, and I know that Andrew Irvine's very strong intention is to uplift customer service. How does the Net Promoter Score feed into the REM? And what other factors feed into the REM? I always see this overweight position on the Net Promoter Score, and I think it's not attenuated by other factors that are published. And there's always comments to say, Mr. Caulfield, certainly there's a whole range of factors we look at, but I would like to see in the annual report a simple one page of metrics. For example, how many customer complaints? What's the duration of the complaints? How many go to a customer advocate? How many go to AFCA? How many hardship cases do we have? How long do they take? There's a whole range of things here, and the Net Promoter Score is a very crude measure where, you know, one foot is in a pot of freezing ice cubes and the other foot is in a pot of burning coals. And you're saying, on average, we're right, it's tepid. It doesn't reflect those extremes, whereas a single page of metrics would bring up, would add a lot of fabric and texture to that conversation.
Thank you. You would be surprised how close the question you've just asked is to the questions that we ask at the board. So when we see Net Promoter Score, and I think I said in my address, one of the areas we fell short of our target this year was on our Net Promoter Score. But the board and the customer committee that Anne Sherry chairs, even if we get a strong number, we interrogate further because, as you say, a single number can hide a lot of detail. So issues like hardship cases, issues like customer complaints, customer resolution, cases that go to AFCA, the outcome of AFCA reviewed cases, these are exactly the data points that the customer committee reviews. And as we've said in our meetings with institutional shareholders, all of our measures that go into a scorecard, and there is a desire to keep the scorecard simple, but all of the measures that we put on the scorecard, we test for substance. So even if we were to get a very strong NPS number, we would still interrogate exactly along the lines you're suggesting. Is it hiding anything we should be aware of? We do the same with our financial outcomes. So when we see a strong financial performance, we will interrogate it to say, was it achieved in a sustainable way? Has it been done through actually being better and getting more business, or has there been some manufacturing of that result coming out of it? So all of the areas that go into the scorecard, we test for substance, not just taking the numbers at face value, because we're acutely aware of the issue that you're raising. So thank you for making that point.
Thank you for those insights and that background. That helps. But would you publish a single page on these other metrics that obviously you're all alive to?
Well, we'll have a look at what we publish. There's a lot of data we do publish, but I'm sure there's more we can, and we're completely open on that.
Thank you very much.
So thank you. We'll certainly have that conversation.
I have a couple of other questions, but I'll sit down and allow a rotation.
Thank you.